Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to Spilling the Word. I'm so excited you're here with me today. We're diving into day 8 of our Christmas experience. And can I just say, yesterday's conversation about Mary's bold yes had me in my feelings all day long. But today, we're shifting our focus to someone who often gets overshadowed in the Christmas story, yet his role was absolutely crucial. We're talking about Joseph and his incredible act of obedience that changed everything. Picture this scene for a moment. You're engaged to the love of your life, planning your future together, and suddenly everything you thought you knew gets flipped upside down. Your fiance comes to you with news that seems impossible. She's pregnant, and it's not your baby, but somehow it's God's plan. That's exactly what Joseph faced, and honestly, most of us would have run for the hills. But here's where Joseph's story gets beautiful. Matthew chapter 1, verse 24 tells us something powerful. When Joseph woke up from his dream encounter with the angel, he didn't hesitate. He didn't call a committee meeting. He didn't spend weeks analyzing every possible outcome. The scripture simply says he did what the angel commanded him to do. Think about the courage that took. Joseph was about to marry a woman carrying a child that wasn't biologically his, in a culture where this could have destroyed both their reputations. He was stepping into a situation that made zero sense from a human perspective, yet he chose trust over fear, obedience over comfort, and faith over what looked logical. What I love about Joseph's obedience is how quiet it was. There's no record of him making grand speeches or demanding recognition for his sacrifice. He simply showed up. He protected Mary when she was most vulnerable. He provided stability for Jesus to grow up in a loving home. He worked with his hands to support his family, teaching Jesus the carpenter's trade along the way. In our social media world where everything has to be performed and documented, Joseph's behind-the-scenes faithfulness hits differently. He reminds us that some of the most important work we do happens when nobody's watching, when no one's applauding, when there are no cameras rolling. Maybe you're in a season right now where you feel invisible. You're showing up every day, doing the hard work, making sacrifices that nobody sees or celebrates. You're changing diapers, working late nights, caring for aging parents, or holding your family together through difficult times. Let me tell you something. That's Joseph-level faithfulness, and God sees every single moment. Joseph's obedience also teaches us about trusting God's timing and methods. He probably imagined starting a family very differently. He likely had plans and expectations about how his life would unfold. But when God's plan looked nothing like his own, Joseph chose surrender over stubbornness. How many times do we miss God's best because we're too attached to our own version of how things should happen? Joseph shows us that sometimes the most beautiful outcomes come from the most unexpected circumstances, but only when we're willing to say yes to God's way instead of insisting on our own. Here's something else beautiful about Joseph's story. His obedience positioned him to be part of something bigger than himself. By saying yes to God's plan, he became the earthly father of Jesus, the protector of the Messiah, a key player in salvation history, but he couldn't have known that in the moment. He just knew what God was asking him to do next, and he did it. That's how faith works, isn't it? We rarely see the full picture. We just see the next step, and we have to decide whether we trust God enough to take it. Joseph took that step, and it changed the world. If you're in a place where God is asking you to trust him with something that doesn't make sense, take encouragement from Joseph's example. Maybe he's asking you to take a job that seems like a step backward, invest in a relationship that feels risky, or move to a new city when you finally feel settled. Whatever it is, remember that obedience often requires us to act before we understand. Joseph also shows us that God can use ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. He wasn't a prophet or a priest or a king. He was a working man, a carpenter who got up every day and used his hands to provide for his family. Yet God chose him for one of the most important roles in history. You don't have to have a platform or a title or special qualifications for God to use you powerfully. You just need a heart that's willing to say yes when he calls, even when that yes costs you comfort, convenience, or control. As we celebrate this Christmas season, let's remember that the nativity scene isn't complete without Joseph standing faithfully beside Mary and Jesus. His presence reminds us that love isn't always loud, but it's always loyal. Faith isn't always flashy, but it's always faithful. And obedience isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. So today, I want to pray that God gives us Joseph's heart, a heart that chooses trust over fear, obedience over comfort, and faith over what seems impossible. May we have the courage to say yes to God's plan, even when we can't see where it's leading. Here's a prayer for today. Lord, help me to trust you like Joseph. Give me the courage to obey even when I don't understand, and remind me that you are working through my faithfulness. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the star that guided the wise men to Jesus and how he continues to be our guiding light today. Until then, remember that your quiet faithfulness matters more than you know.